and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing another semester wrap up. So for context, I have completed 4 years of a political science and gender studies degree. Although I am not graduating. I have 6 classes left before I complete my degree, but instead of just like powering through it and finishing it, I decided to drag it out over another year, especially because if all goes to plan, I would like to have my last semester be a semester abroad. So see you in Europe 2K18. This was the semester that truly and dearly almost killed me, but it didn't. And I think that that is worth celebrating. You know what I'm saying? Like, cheers, benches. Oh my god, has like, not even has a glass of wine after work. Thinks she's partying. I was in 3 different classes, but I'm only going to be talking about 2 in this video because one of those classes was just the research seminar. That was the second half of the class that I talked about in my last wrap up. And so I will do a video discussing all of the research that I did, my graduating capstone thesis project situation, although I am deeply afraid of going back and reading all of that. First up, I did a class called Comparative Political Theory, which, so this was one of the last poli-sci classes I had to do. Thank God, because I swear to God, if I have to be in another room full of poli-sci bros, I'm gonna jump out a window. Like, I can't anymore. But this class was interesting and kind of terrible in lots of different ways. So, comparative political thought is an emerging subfield of political science, which basically in the 90s, a few prominent white dudes were like, oh my god, you know what? There is all this feminist post-colonial literature that's, you know, been out here for a while, and oh my god, what? Political theory hasn't dealt with it at all? Oh my, are you, what? Really? And then thus the emergence of comparative political thought. The first books we looked at was more of the difference category, and that is Comparative Political Thought, Theorizing Practices, which is edited by Michael Frieden and Andrew Vincent. The actual intro that was done by Frieden and Vincent is trash. The intro was saying was not all political theory. Like, they were basically talking about how during like when post-colonial literature started emerging and like Edward Said and Orientalism, they were basically like, the West has been demonized! And it was like, are you for real right now? Like, is this is your argument? Because this like undercurrent throughout this entire course was people being like, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. However, all of the different chapters that are written by different people, not these people, were really good. There was one by Chris Cotto-Jones, turns out works at my university, what's up? I think he had one of the last chapters, but he was basically talking about the ethics of comparativity, which because of this essay became the main theme for what I was researching when I had to do all of my different papers for the class. And he was basically arguing that when you put 2 political traditions, you're assuming that they're willing to be put into conversation with each other. And that is like possibly epistemic violence, you know what I'm saying? Which I thought was a really good point, because I was like, what is the point if you're putting a lot of European Western thought, which yeah, sure, some of it's fine, whatever. But, excuse me, a lot of it was based on the specific dehumanization of a lot of different people. So when you put that into conversations with the people that it was dehumanizing, like what are the ethics of that? Why are we doing that? You know what I'm saying? Like, I have thoughts and questions and concerns. The second book we looked at was Cosmopolitan Political Thought, Method, Practice, Discipline by Farah Godrej, which at the time, after reading a lot of that book, I was like, thank the Lord for Farah Godrej. However, later didn't agree with as many of her points. But basically, she was seeing the emergence of comparative political thought and this reemergence of cosmopolitanism at the same time, and she was like, what's going on there? What's happening? And although her things about cosmopolitanism, I think, kind of like were unnecessarily and didn't really matter, there was a lot of interesting stuff that had to do with methodology, which I love talking about, and comparative political thought in terms of how people engage and how the field is continually being shaped. The third book we had for that class, I've literally never opened. I didn't read a single word. I've barely touched it. And that is Journeys to the Other Shore, Muslim and Western Travelers in Search of Knowledge by Roxanne Eubin. This book, from what I gathered, it had a lot to do with arguing for the actual fluidity of how we think of the history of how theories developed. Did that make sense? Like, she was arguing that the boundaries that we've made in terms of West and non-West are actually a lot less stable than we think that they are, or the fact that we have been influencing each other in political thought around the world for a very, very long time, and there's no way to actually just be like, the West came up with the current idea of the state in the Westphalian period. That was it. But she was like, you know what? Other people were doing that kind of stuff at the same time. The West might have borrowed that. The West might have borrowed that. You know what I'm saying? So it's more about like, just like, history didn't happen how you think it did. Shout out to my entire degree being the main theme. But apparently this is one of the only books that even briefly touched on gender. So, you know what I mean? Guess I missed out because we literally never talked about that. The last class was a gender studies class, and it was on the medicalization of sex. This class was great. We talked a lot about Viagra. I will never look at not even just Viagra, but just like a single drug commercial the same ever again. We didn't have a book for that class, but one of the readings that was assigned I had in a book I already own, which is telling, which was Passion and Power, Sexuality and History, which is edited by Kathy Pice and Christina Simmons, which I hauled like in one of the first videos on my channel. We finally got to it, fam. The essay that was assigned for this was by George Chauncey, who I enjoy as a historian of sexuality. The title of the thing that I was reading was From Sexual Inversion to Homosexuality, the Changing Medical Conceptualization of Female Deviance. This was so good. Like, I can't even explain to you the marginalization, the highlighting, the just real intense engagement with this piece because it was perfect. It was basically talking about the shifts from the passive homosexual woman to the deviant homosexual woman, meaning that often the femme in a lesbian or homosexual relationship, kind of in the 19th century or so, was seen as being the victim of the often more masculinized lesbian, because I don't know if you know this, but there's been quite a fluctuating amount of tolerance for homosexual behavior and identity, depending on different factors. But the second we start to transgress gender, kind of like now. It also talked a lot about when people started losing sympathy for who was previously seen as being like the duped victim in a lesbian relationship engaged in homosexual behavior. They became being seen as being complicit in this deviance. In particular, it talked about the Otis girls' school, which was basically this phenomenon where it was a girls' school that was interracial. So that kind of brings up a lot of like who is being seen as being masculinized, and the fact that lots of black women or queer black women are always read as being butch, even though they're not. And like who is seen as being threatening, like at what point does it like public sympathy start to shift and change, you know what I'm saying? I'll read you some of my marginalia if you'd like to get a sense of my experience, which just says, fucking with your hetero paradigms since always because they don't make sense by. eloquent even in marginalia. So that was it, I think. My next video is going to be the War and Peace video. I will be back eventually with the video on the research I did for that class. Until then, I'll see you later. Bye! Shout out to my cat's foot.